Welcome to the Polygamer Podcast, where gaming is for everyone. Join us as we expand the boundaries of the gaming community.
Hello and welcome to Polygamer episode number 44 for May 25th, 2016. I'm your host, Ken Gagney. This week we'll be speaking with Steven Duetzmann, the editor-in-chief of Engaged Family Gaming, the website of which you can find at engagedfamilygaming.com. It's a website by parents for parents who are also gamers and want to raise the next generation of gamers. A little bit of backstory about how I got connected with Steven. Back in January of 2015, I moderated a panel at the Women in Games Boston monthly meetup, the audio of which became Polygamer episode number 14. Shortly after I moderated that panel, the deadline for submitting panels to PAX East 2015 was imminent. I had spent weeks, if not months, preparing for submissions, and then 2 days before the deadline, it occurred to me that the topic of parenting, which was such a great fit for WIG, would also be a great fit for PAX. I didn't think I was a great fit for it, though, because I am not a parent. In fact, I'm quite firmly in the child-free camp. So I emailed my friend Nicole Tompkins Hughes, who I'd also seen moderate a similar panel at Boston FIG, the Festival of Indie Games, back in September of 2014. I asked her, hey, are you planning on doing something like that at PAX? She said no. I said, well, you should, and I'll help you put it together. So I recruited Nicole to be a panelist and moderator, as well as her partner Kyle Churchill to be on the panel. And then I reached out to Amanda Warner, who'd been on my WIG panel, and Steve Lubitz, formerly of the Isometric podcast, who is a mutual friend of mine, Nicole's. Nicole then reached out to her own network and got Christopher Gonzalez, aka Gonzo, as well as Steven Duetzmann, editor-in-chief of EngageFamilyGaming.com. So even though I submitted the panel to PAX for consideration, I was not actually on the panel. And in fact, when the panel got accepted, I could not even attend it because a panel that I had also submitted, which was also accepted, and which I was on, got scheduled for the exact same time. However, I did pop into the last few minutes, got to meet all these people I'd recruited for the panel, including Steven, and I was very excited to see Nicole bring that same team back together for PAX East 2016 to discuss even more issues about parenting and gaming. This time I was able to attend and got to see Steven in his full glory. I was very excited to hear everything that came out of that panel and wanted to continue the discussion on Polygamer, so I emailed Steven and said, hey, how about coming on my show? He wrote back and said, hey, how about coming on my show? So the episode you're about to hear is the first of those collaborations. On the Engage podcast, which Steven co-hosts, we'll be discussing the question that I brought to the panel during the Q&A, which was, how do you make sure that you're raising a generation of geeks when they don't have access to video games? What other resources are available to make sure that they grow up balanced and not solely jocks, for example? I want my niece and nephew to have some of the experiences that I had as a kid, even though their parents won't allow video games into the household. We'll be discussing that issue on Steven's podcast. But today on Polygamer, you'll be hearing about the value in raising kids with video games, how to choose those video games, and what the differences are between the games that kids today have versus the games that Steven and I, who are roughly the same age, had when we were kids. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Again, you can find Steven's website at engagedfamilygaming.com. And you can find this show, Polygamer, at polygamer.net. And the show notes specifically for this episode, where we link to all the resources mentioned in this discussion at plyg.me/44. Also on the website, you can send email feedback, send voicemail, follow us on Twitter, and more. We don't have a Patreon, but if you do want to show your support, we would love a review in the iTunes store. And on that note, thanks so much for listening. Let's get on with the show. Today I'm very excited to be chatting with my friend, Mr. Steven Duetzmann, editor-in-chief of Engaged Family Gaming. Hello, Steven.
Hey, Ken, what's going on?
Not much. How are you this evening?
I am reeling from the crazy Disney Infinity news and the Pokemon news. And yes, I deliberately pronounced that incorrectly. And the fact that Super Mario Brothers is coming to Minecraft. This has been a very busy week for me. So I'm like losing my mind. But I'm glad to have an opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah, I heard that Disney is getting out of the game publishing business. They'll still license their game, so EA will still make Star Wars, but Disney Infinity, which they have published, is kaput.
Yes. Unfortunately, about 300 people lost their jobs, so that's always sad to write about. But I mean, Avalanche is a good studio, not Avalanche that did Just Cause. This is Avalanche Studios. I don't know. One of them's called Avalanche. One of them's called Avalanche Studios. I can never tell them apart because who else? I don't think they can tell it apart. So unfortunately, they lost their jobs, and I'm sure there's a whole bunch of people in manufacturing that are losing some contracts too, which is disappointing. The Toys to Life space just got really crowded really fast, and I don't think that anybody really had a plan, and they just kind of jumped in, and it's kind of like the tablet market, you know, and then Star Wars Battlefront came out, and they had all this, and it sold 14 million copies, and I can't imagine that Disney looked at it and said, you know what? Like, we're not doing anything here. Like, we're literally charging these guys for the right to use our license, and we're not taking any risks. We're just letting people use our IP and being really careful about it and just making dollars. And they must have been like, you know what? Why we're going to make toys anyway. Let's just make toys. Let's go back to the way we used to do it because it was profitable then. But now there are more, you know, the world that we live in now, there's more, I want to say, adequate game development houses available, right? Like, there are plenty of places that would love to just make a Disney game. And, you know, it just makes sense that they just kind of, we're going to go back to the old way. And just, it's disappointing because I enjoyed my 3 or 4 years of not having to review crappy Disney movie tie-ins. But, you know, what are you going to do?
So you mean you're reviewing quality Disney tie-ins for a change?
Well, there weren't any. It was just, you know, here's some cool Disney Infinity figs and whatever. Like, there weren't games, because that was their business model. They were like, you know what? We're not going to make an Alice in Wonderland game. We're not going to make a Finding Dory game. We're going to make some mobile match 3 nonsense, and we'll make a Disney Infinity character, and we'll make a Disney Infinity playset, and that's what we'll do. There was no Frozen game where you ran around as Elsa and Anna and did whatever, right? It just didn't happen. So, because they made a Frozen playset, and that was going to be their model. And I really liked it because, number one, it was a little cheaper. We were going to buy the toys anyway for our kids. And so that worked. Now we're going to go back to having to buy the toys and a, you know, $60, very likely terrible game. Hopefully there will be good games. You know, there are a lot of development houses that make good stuff that can't get their own IP off the ground. They may as well make a licensed tie-in game. Do their best. I'm hoping for the best. I'm looking for a silver lining, but I'm having trouble.
Well, there are some other good news, as you brought up. For example, Mario is coming to Minecraft. The Wii U version of Minecraft is getting a free update later this month that will introduce the characters and settings and items from the Mushroom Kingdom.
And I showed that to my boys, and they pretty much melted. Because they love Minecraft because Minecraft, and they are huge Nintendo fans because they are my children, and I am a slave to Nintendo, and I have passed that on to them. I think it's possible that it was genetic, and so yeah, they freaked out. We, as of right now, don't own the Wii U Minecraft version. I suspect that on June 17th, when the Wii U boxed, like, disc edition comes out, we'll probably be buying that, and it's going to have the Mario skin pack on the disc. I mean, it's only $29.99. That's really not that bad. And, you know, we'll own Minecraft a third time. PC, Xbox, and now Wii U.
It's especially interesting when you think about the fact that Minecraft is published by Microsoft Studios, so Mario characters are appearing in a Microsoft game. Yeah,
and you know what? Microsoft is loving it. They bought Minecraft because I'm going to buy Minecraft for a Wii U, and the Microsoft logo is going to pop up on a Nintendo platform. When this happened, I can't imagine that I was the first one to think of it, but I mean, the reality is they didn't buy that to, like, steal it for themselves. They bought that to put a Microsoft logo everywhere on Earth. They already, you know, parents, like adults, when we think, you know, my wife, for example, when she thinks Microsoft, she thinks Windows. She thinks PCs. She thinks computers. My kids, when they think Microsoft, they think Xbox. So, you know, when they see like a Microsoft store in the mall, they don't realize that like the Xbox thing is like this little itty bitty corner. I mean, there's big TVs and it's exciting, but there's a huge section of that store that's all software and Office and the Surface tablet and PCs. They just don't even, those are just little things. They just think Microsoft is Xbox. So when they see that Microsoft logo popping up on their Wii U, that's drilling into their heads, man. And, it was smart. I mean, in the long run, it's going to be a steal. And, you know, the Wii U version probably isn't selling that well because it's, 2 years too late, maybe 3. But because Minecraft should have been a launch title on the Wii U, that it would have made a difference. I don't know if it would have saved it, but it might have made a difference. And, here we are. It's just more people buying it and a bunch of people buying it for the third time.
It absolutely should have been a launch title, especially with the gamepad, which would have been extremely intuitive for inventory management.
Oh, yeah. I
hear that when Minecraft eventually did come out, it doesn't even support using the gamepad for inventory management.
Yeah, it really doesn't. It's really dumb. I'm a slave to Nintendo. I'll buy everything that they make forever.
Ditto.
I'm going to buy the NX the day it comes out. I bought the 3DS. I bought the Wii U. I love all of these systems. And I know that they are smarter than me at the end of the day. So I'm sure that there is a reason that they didn't do it. However, I cannot imagine living in a world, like I can't imagine it. So I don't know, where I am the guy in charge of software development on the Wii U and I'm looking to get indies. And this is before Minecraft was bought by Microsoft, because the Wii U came out before that they didn't approach Mojang and say, hey, let's get this on our system. As someone that makes console recommendations every holiday to parents as part of my website, every year I would get tweets or emails from parents and I would talk about the Wii U and they would say, that sounds great. Can I get Minecraft on it? And I would say no. And they'd go, oh, well, what else is there? And then they'd go buy a 360. I know at least 10 or 12 families that would have been Nintendo families for their young kids who aged into Minecraft, 6, 7 years old, and their parents bought their first console and they bought an Xbox 360 and now they're shopping for Xbox Ones. And they could have been on the Nintendo family if Nintendo managed to land Minecraft. And I can't imagine, the Wii U certainly would run it. But...
Yeah, they've made a variety of bad decisions, and yet people like you and me keep going back to them because they have great first-party stuff.
I'm a slave to them.
Yep.
I fully accept it, and I understand that my Nintendo love is irrational, so they don't even need to worry about me. They can count on me. If I am the only person on earth to buy their stuff, I will be that guy. But the issue is they lost a whole generation of little kids that was us, right? Back in the day, some of my fondest memories of my childhood were playing on the NES and getting my Super Nintendo for Christmas and freaking out. Like I was the Nintendo 64 kid, but I was a Super Nintendo when I was that age, right? Maybe I was a little older for Super Nintendo. Probably was, but you get what I'm saying. They lost all these kids because they tried to catch lightning in a bottle twice with this Wii U, and they probably could have just ditched the tablet thing and sold like $150 box with a Pro Controller, and everyone would have bought it.
That's how most people are playing it now anyway. But I'm guessing Nintendo did do something right, because you also mentioned the Pokemon news.
Yeah, so, they got in bed with Pokemon whenever it started, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and that is one of their saving graces. Yes, so Pokemon Sun and Pokemon Moon, Generation 7 Pokemon games, dropping November 18th, just in time for the holidays, to be the Nintendo's savior for one more holiday. Those games are going to sell like absolute bat crazy. I know we're buying 3 copies in our house. The boys were deciding today who was going to get Moon, who was going to get Sun, and which game I was allowed to buy. Because that's how it works. And so, yeah, they're selling, so we're $120 right there. Happy birthday, Nintendo.
Well done, Nintendo.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a brilliant model. And these are the first new games in a while since Pokemon X and Y. So this is very exciting stuff.
And they still haven't done a full-fledged Pokemon game for a console, have they?
They have not, and I don't think they ever will. They don't need to. Fans say they want it, but I don't think that they do. It's one of those things where Pokemon is a bite-sized adventure. It's not meant to be, it's meant to be kind of simple. And, I don't think that just up-resing it and putting on a home console would actually make it better. It would be certainly more expensive to make. Like, one of the advantages to the Pokemon games is that because they're on a handheld, they're a little cheaper to make, which makes them more profitable. So, I mean, a fully HD, I think we would end up with Final Fantasy 13 syndrome, right? Where we wanted an HD, crazy, baller Final Fantasy game, and they gave it to us with the limitations that they had, and we hated it because it was too linear. It wasn't exactly what we wanted. And lo and behold, they put out Bravely Default and we buy it like crazy, right? So I don't think fans know what they want, respectfully. I'm sure you have Pokemon fans that are going to tweet at me, but...
Well, that's how you start an internet fight, and that's how you generate the clicks.
That is, in fact, how you get the clicks. Now, that's clicks with a Z.
Of course.
CLICKZ, clicks.
Of course, because we're hip. We're with it.
I'm definitely with it. If you want to start an internet fight with me, fellow listener, that's at EF Gaming. You can tell me that you know what you want. And that's probably true, but I would argue that you probably don't. Because I don't think as many people would buy a console version of a Pokemon like RPG. They say they would. I don't think people would. Maybe some of the hardcore crazy people like me would, but like your average parent probably wouldn't. They would get it for their kids so they can have something to do in the car, and so that they're not going to be obsessed sitting at the television for 300 hours. Because that's somehow less healthy than sitting randomly on your 3DS for 300 hours.
Right. So the reason we're talking about all these family-friendly games is because you are the editor-in-chief of Engaged Family Gaming, found at engagedfamilygaming.com. This website, and I'm quoting here, was created and designed by parents for parents to help them navigate through the world of gaming. Engaged Family Gaming is your comprehensive guide to help you explore and understand the great wide expanse of games of all types.
You went and found our welcome page.
Oh my gosh, it's pinned right beneath your carousel. How can I miss it?
Well, good point. But we do that on purpose because, is that what that thing on the front page on my website's called? That's called a carousel? I had no idea. I'm super excited.
Either a carousel or a slider.
The actual applet that I put on my website, which I spent a lot of money for, by the way, is called a slider. But I'm going to call it a carousel from now on. I'm just going to change it because I like that. And I pinned that there on purpose because you read off exactly what we do. It's been a wild ride. We've been around for 3 years, and it's all my wife's idea. And
tell me about that. What led you to found this website?
So I think I've been writing about games in one form or another for about 7 years. I've never really been published anywhere super fancy. That's why I have my own site, because I can publish my own stuff. I don't tell myself no. It's nice to pitch to myself. It's very easy. So, I was, writing about games, and I wanted to get into games, and I was playing the slow game. I wrote for The Examiner, which is, pretty low key. But, guys like, Dan Tack, who works for Game Informer now, and, some other folks have gotten their start there. And so I thought, why not give it a shot? At the very least, it would give me, experience with like content management systems and, SEO and stuff like that. And it really did. Eventually though, I realized that I was just another voice in the crowd. I wasn't doing anything interesting because I would go to my day job, I would come home, I would publish my 1 or 2 articles, and I wouldn't really see a lot of traffic because by the time I was reporting the news or talking about it or even giving my take, 150 other sites had already done far better than I did. Eventually, I was going to quit, and I told my wife, and she was like, you have kids, and, maybe you should think of something related to writing about games for children. And, I thought about it, at work, at my day job, I, for the longest time, had been sending out like a newsletter at Christmas because I had a lot of moms and grandmothers that worked with me. And I would tell them, okay, these are like the 3 or 4 games that you're going to want. And, so that they had some idea what was going on. And I would also say, these are the games you don't want if your kids are like 10. And this is where I'd be like, hey, Grand Theft Auto is good, but, shooting nuns in the head and stuff, right? So I would do some of that stuff. My wife was like, why don't you take that newsletter and just expand the crap out of it and make a website? And so I did some market research and realized that it was a very underserved market. There's, at that point, maybe a handful of websites that did what I do. And, 3 months later, I was launching. And that was in May of 2013. And I've been doing it for 3 years. And then the first thing I did is I covered E3, remotely. And I've been doing it ever since. And it's been a lot of fun. I've gotten to do some really cool stuff. I still have my day job. This is still what I like to call a super hobby. But I've gotten to speak at PAX twice, which is how we met. I go to Toy Fair in New York, over Valentine's Day weekend. As you can imagine, my wife is super thrilled about that. But, because my board game coverage, so I get to go there, for, looking at the board games. I've met some insane people. I got to go to New York City with my son, who's 10, and, play the new Guitar Hero game before it came out last year, for a period of time. According to their PR people, he was the youngest human being on Earth to have played Guitar Hero for like 3 months.
That's pretty cool.
Which was neat. We went to this high rise. They had rented out a suite. By the way, the donuts were the best part of the whole trip because they had some slamming donuts. My son wouldn't eat. It was the weirdest thing ever. But it was, I get to do all sorts of cool stuff. I went to the Guitar Hero reveal in New York City, stuff like that. So, and I get to write about games that my kids enjoy, and I get to give other parents who are so overwhelmed with advertising and messaging and, oh, my friend has this and all the kids at school are playing that. And I've gotten to give some parents some real good advice and, build relationships with my audience, which has been really rewarding. Getting to watch like their kids grow and their interests change based on some of the recommendations that I make. I think I'm having like a real positive influence on some of these kids and helping them not only avoid awful games, but play good games, not just play kiddie games for no reason, but play good stuff like Mario Kart and Splatoon and Shovel Knight, etc. That was a rant, but you asked.
And do you review the games based on just whether they're family appropriate, or are you also assessing them for like what sort of values or skills they teach?
You know what? So our review is broken down into 4 main components, really. We do an overall review that is, the top section is what you would read anywhere else. Basically, is it good objectively, or is it bad? And so that would be a review just like you would read a GameSpot or IGN. That's where I get to kind of be a traditional video game reviewer. We also do a family gaming assessment where I will specifically look at it and break down the content. I'll get a little bit more in detail with the ESRB, content descriptors or anything that I saw. And I kind of have a standard disclaimer that I include whenever there is online play involved, because as soon as you expose yourself or your children to the internet, it changes everything fundamentally, as you know, being that you're on Twitter. And then the next thing we do is a playability assessment. And I think this is something that most, like the ESRB doesn't handle and most other sites don't. And that's where I talk about whether or not it's possible for a kid to play the game. Like, what skills do they need in order to be able to actually play it? For example, Madden is my killer app on this. Madden's just about appropriate for just about anybody, because you would let a 5-year-old watch the Super Bowl. I know football's a super violent sport, but we contextualize it within that realm, so people don't think of it as violent necessarily. So Madden is rated E or E10 plus, right? But I wouldn't hand that game to a 6-year-old and expect them to be able to play it and actually enjoy themselves, because it's a simulator. It's super hard. The same reason why I wouldn't hand Forza Horizon to a 6-year-old and expect them to do anything but crash, because it's a simulator, you know? I mean, it's a hard game to play. So we talk about that. You know, is there reading involved? You know, things like that. And then we do a conclusion, which is basically a thumbs up, thumbs down. You know, we don't score games, because how the heck would I score things? So we just give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Sometimes it's if you like these kind of games, then this might be worth looking into. That's how we handle the reviews. As far as what it can teach, sometimes it's hard to pin that down, because kids are going to learn different stuff from different games. You know, unless the game is explicitly attempting to teach a specific topic, I leave it alone. I talk about it on my podcast and, you know, in person all the time, that everything is educational if you use it right.
Do your kids play a role in the review process? Do they help you test the game or anything like that?
Yeah, they're my minions. So when games come in, typically I'll play it first. And, you know, if for nothing else, because that's what dads do. You know, I'll play it first, get a feel for it. You know, figure out some of the bugs, figure out how it controls, etc. And then I'll tell them how it's played. And then I'll just let them go. And, you know, I'll watch for a while. I'll leave them alone and let them play if it's something that I think that they should play. And, you know, we'll talk about it. And when I leave them alone, the biggest thing that I'm looking for is not necessarily did they have fun, because I'll know when they enjoy it. If they're playing a game that's garbage, they're very vocal about that. I don't really have to ask. But you know, what I want to know is, like, how often did they call me for help? You know, how frustrated did they get with the controls and things like that? So they absolutely get involved. And the same thing with our board game coverage. My wife runs a home daycare, so it is very frequent that we will get board games shipped into the house, and, you know, she and I'll play a bit, and then she'll set up the demo and play it with the kids in the daycare, and then she'll, you know, write the reviews based on her experience with them.
Do you ever let your kids play a game without you having played it first?
Yes, but not if it's specifically for EFG. The most recent game that I've let, like, if it's something that's a birthday present for them or something like that, and we didn't pick it up for review purposes or have it sent to us, then we don't follow through its normal process. I let them play their birthday presents first. One of the examples is, my son, he bought recently, like, Hyrule Warriors, and because we didn't get it when it was, review time. And so I actually went away for a weekend, and he played a whole bunch while I was gone. So, yes. So to answer your question, I will let them play games without me touching it first, but only in specific circumstances, like if it was a gift for them. But before a game gets onto their birthday wish list, or they get it or buy it, it's generally been vetted through me or my wife first to be, you know, whether or not it's a game that's appropriate for them. Most games don't need to be screened before they see it. And they do a very good job of self-censoring. You know, if they see a game on the shelf, you know, they'll say, "Oh, Dad, that's T. Like, is this one going to be an okay T game, or is this going to be one of the bad T games?" And so they're very sensitive to that, and they don't want to push it. So I don't really have to take stuff away very often.
So you do let your kids play T games?
I do. And it really depends on the context. So I'll use Overwatch as an example because we just played the crap out of it this past weekend. Overwatch is a shooter, but it is super cartoony, and it is, in my mind, about as violent as an Avengers cartoon or the Avengers movies. It's literally the Avengers almost, only it's kind of animated. There's not a lot of blood. There's no language. Like, I had no problem letting them play Overwatch as long as they had the voice chat off. Because it's the people that they're playing with that I'm more worried about. I'm always an advocate for parents figuring out what their concerns are. For example, there's lots of parents that let their kids watch horror movies, right? And because they're scary and they know it's not real and, they like that experience. And they share it together. And I'm not here to say that you can't do that, that's parents are their own thing. And so you have to have your own limits. Like, what is your issue? And I am way more concerned with language and, like inappropriate, like sexual content than I am with non-gory violence. So I'm not going to have them play Call of Duty where, there's headshots and the guys are all bloody and everything's crazy and the bodies lie on the ground. But I will let them play Overwatch where if they kill a guy, they just despawn and go away. Because the guy barely dies. But like if they like dropped a whole bunch of F-bombs on the way out, like I'm not going to do that. So we're more concerned about that stuff because I don't want them to repeat swear words than say, talk about shooting a cartoon character, because Iron Man has killed mad dudes. And I don't have a problem letting him watch Iron Man movies, and his body count is crazy high. So, we make that judgment call. But I think every other parent has to be their own thing. Obviously, there are some things they aren't going to want to do.
So you do use the ESRB ratings as a guideline, but you don't follow them blindly. Do you feel that they do serve a useful purpose? Because they have over the years gotten some criticism for not being sufficiently visible or descriptive. A lot of, I used to work at GameStop and parents would come in and buy Grand Theft Auto for their kids, even though we wouldn't sell directly to the kids. The parents would just buy it for them. Are the ratings that useful?
I think they're great. I personally don't pay attention to the rating so much as I pay attention to the content descriptors on the back, because those are more important, because that's why did it get this rating. For example, if a game includes any gambling at all, it jumps to a T rating. That means like a card game that might include Texas Hold'em will get bumped to a T rating, even though, come on, it's a card game, right? So, right. I think context is super important. But I do think the ESRB matters because at the very least it gives parents a guide. You are right. There are some visibility issues. But there have been the ESA has published stats regarding the ESRB, and the vast majority of parents are aware of them and, use them. You're right. And I hear horror stories from GameStop employees, on Twitter, and, you just mentioned it, the whole parents buying Grand Theft Auto for their kids. Those are likely some of the same parents that let their kids back in the 80s watch Friday the 13th, or, had them watch the Terminator movies, things like that, right? Like, there are parents who are comfortable letting their kids engage in mature media and just either talk to them about it or don't deal with it. There are some parents that are just going to do that. Some of them are just going to do it and don't care, and just because they're just games. I think that it is a small percentage of parents that would go to a store and buy GTA and not realize what they were doing. Like that it would be a shock, at least now, because it gets mainstream press like, hey, this game is super violent.
But those parents, people that are your age and mine, did grow up watching Friday the 13th and Terminator, and by all appearances, we turned out okay. So what's the problem with letting kids play Call of Duty Black Ops?
I don't think there necessarily is one. I think the issue is it's all about each individual family. And you're right. I watched some movies that I watched Spaceballs when I was like 7. And I watched Blazing, my dad's a huge Mel Brooks fan, and I watched Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein and all those movies when I probably shouldn't have, learned some words that I probably shouldn't have, right? And I turned out okay, but my parents talked to me about it. And, my dad was like, listen, dude, I mean, this is comedy. It's not reality. And don't repeat what these guys say, because for real, you're not supposed to say these words. And I listened because he talked to me. And so you're right. I don't think there's necessarily a problem with it by itself because we turned out okay. I think it's really a matter of I don't think video games are something that people need to be protected from. I don't view myself as a shield that stands in front of kids from all these big, bad, harmful video games. I just think that there is a time and a place to watch. I mean, we talk about Friday the 13th and, Terminator. Those are classics, right? These are, seminal works. It's kind of like watching The Godfather, right? It's horrifically violent, but it's an amazing experience. For every one of those, there's 20 or 30 schlocky horror garbage movies or just Terminator ripoffs, right? Those were super experiences that our parents shared with us or we shared with all our friends or what have you. And sure, we were watching those, but we probably did other stuff too. I think that with video games, there's time. You don't need to play that stuff because there are other things, other good games. So I'm rambling with myself here and I apologize, but you ask a really good question and it almost calls into question the purpose of my site. I strongly feel parents should do whatever they want, but a lot of parents just buy that stuff because they don't know that there's other good stuff out there that's not like a baby game for babies. And I show them the good stuff and say, you know what? They can play Call of Duty when they're 13. Let them, you're 14 or whenever you feel it's okay. How about when they're 10? How about they play some Mario Kart? Let's start them that way. And parents seem to be receptive of it. But I mean, if I see a kid playing Black Ops, I'm not going to yell at their parents and call them irresponsible. I mean, they're playing a video game.
And one of the qualities of video games that I think is often overlooked, and although it's very obvious with board games, is that it's a great way to bond with your kids, an experience you can share with Mario Kart, for example, or Mario Party, which is even more of an equalizer. That's something that you and your kids can sit down and do together.
Correct. And that's a big piece of that's the engaged part of family gaming, right? Like I think it probably isn't a great idea to sit a 10-year-old online in Call of Duty and just expose them to the public because they're going to learn some crazy words. They're going to pick up some bad habits and some bad behaviors. Maybe not shooting people, but maybe calling people bad names and threatening to do bad things to their wives, sisters, girlfriends, mothers, etc. Things like that. We all see these toxic 12-year-olds that say bad. That's because they were taught by somebody else. But my kids, when we're in the same room together, playing Overwatch or playing Splatoon, there is, we have bonding experiences. There's nothing quite like sitting with your kids while they are doing well at a game and really being able to enjoy it and cheer them on in something that they are enjoying. My kids don't play baseball, but man, do they love playing Splatoon and watching them succeed. I get that same kind of feeling that a dad does watching their kid get a home run. It's just my kids don't want to play baseball. So I game with them and, we talk about it and they teach me and, I teach them and it because video games don't involve athletic size, strength, etc., we're on an even playing field. So they can teach me tricks just like I can teach them. It's a very different experience.
Now, there are a lot of different pastimes you can expose your kids to, and each one introduces a different quality or value. Sports teaches collaboration, teamwork, and leadership. If you sit your kid down with a good novel that teaches empathy, some critics would say that video games teach obesity. So what is the value in even raising kids with digital technology at all, when they should be spending more time outside running around like we did when we were kids?
It's all about balance. So you say video games, you said, let's break that down, right? So you said sports teach leadership and teamwork. You know what? Video games can teach that same thing. When you're going to play Overwatch or you're going to play Splatoon, if you're just off doing your own thing while your team is trying to complete objectives, you're failing everyone. You need to work together. You need to communicate. And through a lot of these, you have to communicate in ways that are nonverbal, because, sometimes voice communication is impossible, like in Splatoon. So you have to find interesting ways to communicate. You need to not, infight with your own guys. So I argue that you can learn some of those same things from video games as well. I personally, a huge amount of my leadership experience has come from games. And so, I played World of Warcraft and was a raid leader. I learned about negotiation and, how to not bark orders, how to give constructive criticism to other players when they made mistakes without hurting their feelings. That's being able to give constructive criticism, and coaching is a skill that I never would have learned. And I use it in my day-to-day job every day. And I got it because I was teaching people how to heal on raid bosses, right? So in regards to empathy, I would argue that playing a good role-playing game will have the same effect. My sons play Final Fantasy IV, and he's playing through it, and he's feeling bad for these characters, and he's identifying with them. And he plays Pokemon, and he sees these Pokemon trainers that are these little kids. I mean, they're in grade school, picking up a monster in a ball and going out on this wide adventure where and the whole world is before them, and all they have is that little bit of magic. I argue that is a parallel that a lot of 10-year-old kids in the United States can draw, is that there's a lot of crazy stuff out there. There's a lot of monsters out there, but just hold on to that magic and use it for you. You're going to learn empathy there. And, maybe not on your own, but, you can learn that by talking to people. As far as video games promoting obesity, I think that it is unhealthy to do anything to the exclusion of all other things. You can get just as fat reading the entire Wheel of Time series, chowing on pork rinds, that you can playing Final Fantasy. Period. The end. Harry Potter is 8 books? You can spend a summer reading all Harry Potter books and not doing anything else. And it's not going to be you're not getting any exercise doing that. Yet somehow we excuse books from the obesity thing. It's not just screen time that does that. It's sedentary lifestyle. It's not, I get that. It's not the video game's fault that kids are getting fat. It's that parents aren't playing with their kids. The American Society of Pediatrics the APA, AAP. The APA is the Acolyte Protection Agency. That's a wrestling thing. But I think it's the AAP. I don't know. The Pediatrics Association has provided guidelines for how much how much screen time kids should get in a day. They're revising those guidelines. They're going to be coming out this fall. I await them with bated breath. But the American Academy of Pediatrics, or whatever they're called, has been very specific that balance is important. And so the value of video games is that it is the only place where you can perform a task and learn a behavior and be tested at the same time and get immediate feedback and get an opportunity to redo it right away. And you're encouraged to fail. Mario falls in a pit. You learn that he falls in a pit. You're immediately sent, okay, do it again, do it better. That's scientific thinking. That's experimental thinking. That's self-reflective process of, okay, Mario fell in that pit. I need to figure out how to get past that pit. So let me experiment. what am I doing wrong? I mean, that Dark Souls, that's the whole point of the game. It's fair, but it's going to kick you in the face repeatedly. Mario works the same way, right? It's fair that you can jump over that thing. I know you can. Nintendo's not going to design an unfair broken game. So get over it. And, my kids get frustrated, but eventually they break that, right? You can apply that learning to real life applications without real, the belief that, okay, I know that I can pass this test. My teacher would not give me a math problem that I could not solve. So let me do it. And if I get it wrong, I'm going to go back and do it again. And I'm going to be able to figure it out. That is unteachable elsewhere. You're not going to get that from a book, So that's absolutely where I think some of the value in video games comes. Beyond the fact that if we're going to question the value of video games from a narrative perspective, I think that they are, especially as they are getting more complex and nuanced and the art form is growing, they are just as interesting as many books, from a narrative perspective and the characters, things like that. We don't have a problem when kids watch movies.
Right. For example, I played Life is Strange, and episode 4, from a literary narrative perspective, was so powerful, all the more so because it was interactive. It put me in a position to make a decision that I have never had to make and never expected to have to make. Yep. And it was jaw-dropping. Exactly.
These kids are making their own stories, and that's something that they can't do elsewhere. And, I can understand concern. It doesn't look, to a layman, video games just look like stupid toys. But, and I talk to parents about this all the time. You know what? Legos look like stupid pieces of plastic until you get down on your hands and knees and you build the Death Star. Right? This is the same thing. Legos are just those things you step on and hurt your feet until you actually play with them, until you learn about them. And then you go, okay, you know what? This Mario thing, this isn't just a stupid waste of time. There's something here. And, everything builds to something else. Life is Strange is a great example. That is a amazing story game. It's an exploration of what it's like to be a teenager. You learn some empathy there. All time paradoxes aside, because time is just the worst thing to write about or design about or make movies about because you're always going to be wrong. But, it's an amazing, it's a beautiful experience. I mean, thankfully it was critically successful. Hopefully Square will do something else like it. But, the idea of what's the value of games, there's a lot. I could go on for a dissertation.
Did you mention that your kids are playing Final Fantasy IV?
Yes.
Now, I assume that's not something that they stumbled across on their own. It's probably something you grew up on and that you want them to experience just like you did.
So, funny story. Yes. I mean, that's largely part of it. I played Final Fantasy II on the Super Nintendo. It was my first role-playing game that I really grokked, right? My son, when he got his first 3DS, we used to do this thing at GameStop. I called it playing the game. And what we would do is we would go there when they did their buy two, get one free sales on used games. And we would try and get like the coolest combination of games, of 3 games for under $25. Like how cool could you get these games? And we would spend hours trying to like min-max everything. Like I'm a huge nerd. I do this with my brother. And I brought Evan in for the first time to play with me and my brother. And he obviously went right to the DS games. And he pulled up Final Fantasy IV, which was remade for the DS with 3D graphics and voice acting. By the way, did you know the main character's name is Cecil? I didn't know that.
What did you think it was?
I thought it was Cecil. So I put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable. I didn't know it was Cecil. I've never met anyone by that name. So I assumed that it was Cecil, but it was Cecil. And it blew my mind when I heard the name, when I heard it pronounced. He came out and he's like, yeah, I was playing as Cecil. And I was like, don't you mean Cecil? And he's like, what do you mean Cecil? It's Cecil. That's what it says in and I was like, oh, all right. Well, they obviously were right. So he started playing through it and he played for a while and then stopped and then started over and he's churning his way through it and he loves it. I mean, he's engaged with the characters. For a while, this is like 2 years ago, I've got this 8-year-old who for Halloween, he wanted to be Kane.
The Dragoon.
The Dragoon, yeah.
Oh, see, I mispronounced it.
How'd you pronounce it?
What did you say? How did you pronounce it?
Dragoon.
Yeah, I think I said Dragoon.
Emphasis on the wrong syllable. It happens. I could be wrong. I don't know.
No, you're probably right.
I don't think I've ever heard another human being say that word.
It doesn't come up in daily conversation.
It certainly doesn't. But I do listen to a lot of video game podcasts, so you'd think that someone else would bring it up. But Dragoons or Dragoons or whatever, they're Final Fantasy specific. So, although GameSpot has a new Final Fantasy based podcast called Airship with Alexa Ray Correa and Peter Brown, who happens to be my cousin, and I'm sure it'll come up there. So maybe if they ever say what the right pronunciation is, I'll let you know.
Well, there's also the PS1 game, The Legend of Dragoon.
Oh, man.
It's a whole RPG about dragoons.
They're like Transformer dragons. I love that game. They need to bring that game back. That's like a Sony IP. Could you imagine if they just rolled out at E3 like this year? We're making another Legend of the Dragoon. Like, there's a very small subset of nerds who would literally crap their pants.
It would be worth it just to see that happen.
Oh, man. I mean, I'd play it. I would buy that.
They released the PS1 version for PS3.
Yes, they did, which was smart. I mean, that's making dollars. I mean, they own these games. The code's in a vault somewhere. Might as well put it on the internet.
I hope it's in a vault somewhere. The Panzer Dragoon Saga, the code is gone. They'll never be able to reproduce that game. Only one of the best RPGs ever for the Sega Saturn and for no other system ever again.
Nobody can just get the disc from a collector and like backwards hack it. Like no hacker can like.
You would think they'd be able to decompile it or image it and put it into an emulator, but I mean, and maybe that has been done, but Sega says that they can't do anything with it because they don't have the code.
I mean, somebody's got a disc that they would loan them, I'm sure.
I mean, I have the disc, but apparently, like, I'm not a developer. I don't know what goes into this, and apparently they need the decompiled version from which they produced that disc.
Well, making games is hard.
It is.
So I don't pretend to know. So if Sega says they can't do it, they probably wouldn't make that up.
So you have kids that you're raising to play video games, and sometimes it's even the same games that you grew up with, just like you and I played Final Fantasy II on the Super Nintendo. But there are some differences in our generations. For example, you and I had video games which our parents really didn't have. That was new to them. They had to figure out what this thing was that we were playing with. And similarly, your kids now have mobile devices, which whereas you and I had Game Boy, I think it's fair to say that tablets and smartphones are yet another thing entirely. So how does that change the equation when you're raising kids to be, well-informed gamers, I guess?
It's a very good question. It really all comes down to access. They aren't old enough to have smartphones yet, but, we have an iPad in the house and they'll rock into the App Store and, ask for, all kinds of crazy free-to-play games, right? And so we will, so whereas for us, if we wanted a game, it was a process. We had to go to the store. We had to convince our parents to like drive us there. It was complex. Now they just can pick up the iPad and be like, "Hey, Dad, can we spend $3 on this?" Or, "Dad, I want to download this game." And so the ready access to millions of games, be it on the iOS App Store or on, Xbox Live Marketplace, or the eShop, that's the biggest thing. It's that because they have access to a new game every second, they don't cherish that new experience the same way that we did, right? Like, I don't know if you had the same experience as I did. We didn't have a lot of money. So my brother and I we knew we would get 3 games a year. We knew we could count on that. one for me for my birthday, one for him for his, and we would maybe, if we were lucky, get 2 for Christmas, but generally it was like one big one, right? And so I remember my birthday is in November, my brother's is in March, and Christmas. So like the summertime, we would get that Nintendo Power, and we would plan, all right, I'll get this for my birthday, whatever, right? So for us, if we got a game that was kind of bad, like we just said, screw it. And we played the shit out of it because that was what we got, Whereas with my kids, if they hop onto their mobile, the iStore or the iStore, the iTunes App Store, and they don't like something, even if they spent money on it, they just discard it. And that changed things a lot. The idea of being able to play games anywhere, I had a Game Boy very early. And so mobile gaming is not new to us. And frankly, they spend a lot more time on their DSs than they would on the iPad because they play Pokemon and they play Animal Crossing and stuff like that with each other. But man, the fact that they can just go on the App Store, man, it's crazy. It makes games garbage. And we talk about how it's like reduced the value of games. I mean, there's been countless thought pieces all over the internet for that. Best way to look at that is with our kids. If they don't like something, they just throw it away. Like a bad burrito.
But does that make it harder to value the good games too?
Sometimes it's, because sometimes good games take a while to get good. How many role-playing games have we had to, plow through and like, okay, it gets good on hour 3. You and I are used to that. Whereas my kids, they sit down and the game doesn't get good right away. And they're like, oh, well, this sucks. I don't want to play this anymore. I'm like, no. It's just play it a little bit longer. It makes it tough for them to get it. Tutorials bug them because they're, it's not the right thing. It makes it really hard for them to appreciate older games. I try, we have a Retron hooked up behind me. Well, you can't see it because I have my screen up, but, we got the Retron hooked up down here and, they play like Mega Man X and they die a lot right away. And they're like, oh man, this just kind of sucks. And I'm like, what are you kidding? I mean, Mega Man X is one of the best games ever made. What are you talking about? This sucks. And it's just because it's not awesome right away. Like you don't immediately have all these cool superpowers. So why would they want to waste their time?
That's true, but I think it also varies based on the individual. I remember when I was a kid, there was a Super Nintendo game called Paladin's Quest, and a friend of mine said that it gets excellent in hour 3 or 4, like you said. And, I don't usually plan that far ahead. I don't think, gee, I want to be having fun 4 hours from now. I better start now. There are so many games that I can engage with right away. And sure, RPGs especially take a while to build up. Like Earthbound, for example, gets off to a very slow start. You're a kid in a town with a baseball bat. That doesn't really, pull you in. But you play long enough, you're like, oh, this is a good game. So I think it varies based on the game, the genre. I'm not sure that kids today necessarily have less attention, but there are a lot more things vying for that attention.
Oh, absolutely. And you're right. I mean, it's not that they can't get into it. It's that why bother when I can just hop over and try this new thing?
Right, exactly. So you said that your kids don't have smartphones yet, and there have also been studies suggesting that even younger than that, kids should not be exposed to digital screens for the first 2 or 3 years of their lives or so. What would you say is an appropriate age at which to introduce kids to video games? Or if you don't have a general answer for that, at what age did you introduce your kids?
So to respond to that specific requirement, again, I would, I think, any parents that are listening to this, that is certainly a valid concern. That is, those guidelines are all being brought up and, redone this fall. I expect when those recommendations go up, all the morning talk shows and everything like that will be talking about it. I will be talking about it at length. It's all about context with like little kids using it, because there is a huge difference between like a toddler staring at a screen, and like watching like, Baby Einstein stuff. I don't know if you were familiar with that. Like, we call it baby crack. It's like, basically just movies with this stupid toys moving back and forth or whatever with nursery rhymes playing in the background. There's a difference between them watching like mindless television basically, or having mommy or daddy read them a story out of an ebook. That's screen time, but is it really? So that's my response to that, really. It's all about context, and let's stay tuned to when they change their guidelines. As far as me, my 3 kids are at very different ages. They are 10, 7, almost 8, and 3. And so their exposure has varied based on the times that they grew up in. But Evan, I have a very distinct memory of Evan, that's my oldest, using taking the family iPad and turning on a Spider-Man cartoon on Netflix when he was 2. Because he watched us do it and it was intuitive. And our youngest has been exposed to screens for as long as she could touch them. Because for us, it's, we never gave her the iPad all by herself until very recently. But we have them, I have my phone, my wife has hers. So she's had access almost her entire life. It's really all about how, for us, we value what they're doing with it. Are we playing a game with them? Are we, showing them pictures of family members? Because Facebook, we all see pictures of our family and our friends. She doesn't get to see her grandmother every day, but my mom's pictures on Facebook. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
No, I think so. Just like when you're deciding what games to let your kids play, it's very much a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, there's no hard and fast answers. I'm in a hard business, right? The idea of giving people advice to which every individual child needs their own specific tailor-made answers, because every kid's different. Some kids just don't react well with screens. Maybe maybe they're uncomfortable with them, or they get really hyper. Well, then, get them away from it. Come up with something else to do.
Mm-hmm. And do your kids do other things? Do they play sports, read books?
So they tried baseball. They hated it. They're scouts. Now that the Boy Scouts are starting.
That's right. Didn't you just go on a fishing trip? A fishing derby?
It was, I was supposed to, it got rained out. But the idea is, now that the Boy Scouts are starting to kind of catch up with the times, they're not there yet. They'll get there. But we, so the boys got in there. And so they do that. They, my oldest son reads he's a machine, dude. I certainly don't complain. But he'll read a book in a weekend. He will just, if it's like a rainy weekend and we don't force him outside, that kid will sit down. He'll just churn through a whole book, like a real, book. The last Harry Potter book he read in a week, like Deathly Hallows. And at that point it was last year. So he was 9. So he reads a lot. Our middle son, will do a lot of art, and they spend a lot of time outside in the backyard. We're a LARPing family. So,
Really?
So I frequently spend weekends away from my kids, LARPing. So I, dress up like an elf or whatever. And so they buy into that themselves. Sometimes we have kids events, the games that I go to, and they'll go to there. And other times they're just, making up games in the backyard, and they're Knights and Dragons and Pokemon trainers. And recently they've been members of Overwatch, Avengers, obviously, because if you can be Iron Man, always be Iron Man.
Brief aside, have you seen the movie Knights of Badassdom?
Yeah, that's not what it's like.
I thought it was a fun movie, though.
Oh, it was definitely a fun movie. It was great. It was one of those movies where I was like, all right, this is cool. It's not what it's like. Believe it or not, it's closer to Role Models. Really is. Did you ever see Role Models?
No, what is that?
Oh, bro. I'm not even going to spoil it for you. You just got to look at Role Models. It's one of those comedies. It's like, I don't know if Seth Rogen's in it, but like it feels like he should be. And it's about a guy who, I can't even describe it. It ultimately involves a kid who LARPs, and it's McLovin is the kid. Do you remember McLovin? He was in another movie. I forget.
No, sorry.
Just look up Role Models. It's on Netflix right now, I'm sure.
Is this with Sean William Scott and Paul Rudd?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. I've not seen Sean William Scott in anything since like Dude, Where's My Car?
Yeah.
I have to pull this up.
Yeah, yeah, oh my God, Sean William Scott. That's Stifler, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah. He will
and of
never
course, Paul
not
Rudd
be
is
Stifler to
Ant-Man.
me. Yeah, and Paul Rudd is Ant-Man and all manner of other things. Yeah, Role Models is really, really dumb.
Excellent. So that's how I choose my next movie. When choosing video games for your kids, I believe there was a comment made on the PAX panel you were at by our friend Nicole, who was the moderator. I believe what she said was, if you want a kid-friendly video game, you really need to go indie. And you vehemently disagreed.
I did.
And certainly there are, AAA first-party examples on the Wii U, but what evidence is there that Nicole was speaking out of turn on that?
Much love to Nicole. She's great. I'm sure she's listening. I hope she's listening. She's awesome. So I certainly, it was nothing personal, but, I don't think that the idea that you must go indie is correct, because I think that there are family appropriate games coming out of the AAA space. The idea that you have to go indie ignores the entire Toys to Life franchise, which, admittedly, I made that answer before Disney Infinity folded, so maybe I should amend it now, but between Skylanders, Lego Dimensions... Amiibos are their thing, but I said get a Wii U, and, so Amiibos are kind of tied into that. But with the 3 different Toys to Life franchises, all of the different sports games, there are, and the fact that family friendly by itself doesn't mean a lot, because each family is going to be different. For example, Street Fighter V is totally appropriate for my family. We're competitive and it's a sport. Admittedly, there's fireballs and stuff, but I view that game as a family friendly title for us. So I think that the idea of something being family friendly, and there's no one size fits all for family friendly. What is appropriate for me and my family is going to be different for her. And so I guess it's possible that for her, that might be the case. I just kind of reject the notion that there's one size fits all. And also the idea that you must go indie is it by definition false, because you can just buy a Wii U. And that was my main point there, was you can get a AAA family-friendly experience. If for nothing else, you can just buy a Nintendo and buy all their games, and you'll be totally fine. But there are other games that come out. I mean, every game company has parts of their portfolio that are intended and targeted towards family audiences. Sometimes, and maybe right now is a bad example because we're still kind of ramping into the development cycle for both the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, and games take a long time to make. So now is probably not the best time to do that because we're still kind of in the beginning. However, Ratchet and Clank is a game. And, between Ratchet and Clank and all the sports games, can we really call Minecraft an indie? I guess that's a real question. Is Minecraft indie? I mean, are they anymore?
I think it was.
Well, I know it was, but how do we view it now? It's kind of a transformative thing, right? And so I think what my biggest issue with it is that it were a lot of generalizations that were kind of thrown into one thing, because indie is starting to not really mean anything anymore. I mean, The Witness is technically an indie game, but come on. Sony pretty much bankrolled that Jonathan Blow for 3 or 4 years to make sure that game was exclusive. So that was kind of my specific struggle with that statement, is that you can't just reject the main consoles.
Well, I think that both AAA and indie exhibit a diversity of games. If you go AAA, you can find stuff like The Binding of Isaac or Super Meat Boy, which, due to content or difficulty, might not be appropriate for kids. So I don't think it's fair to say that AAA games have no kid-friendly games any more than it is to say indie games have no adult-appropriate games. They both have something for everybody.
Correct. You're right, and I think that's kind of where I was getting at. Just that one sentence. I think I know we know what she was getting at, and the idea that you definitely should explore indie games because you can find a lot of stuff that you won't find otherwise. And I agree. There's a lot of great indie games that are perfect for kids that parents would have no idea about. My sons love Shovel Knight.
Great game.
And obviously they're a little bit different, right? Because they're kind of plugged in to the gaming space because I am, right? But how many parents would have any idea what the hell that was? The idea that, I spend a lot of time kind of bringing independent games to the forefront because they need it more. Call of Duty doesn't really need my help.
Exactly.
And Activision knows that. That's why they don't send me review copies. So, right? Like they don't need my help. And, parents can find a lot of these bigger titles. So the indie games need more attention and assistance from, like us, the gaming press. However, the idea that they're the only place or the place that you have to go to get family appropriate games, I just disagree. And I think that, I may have overreacted a little bit on the panel for humorous effect, because I really do have nothing but the utmost love and respect for Nicole. I think she's great.
How can you not? She's amazing.
She's great. I really hope she is listening now that both of us paid her great compliments. She'll blush or whatever.
Aw.
Well, she's great. She organized that panel with a sick kid, and the last year's panel, she did it while she was pregnant, which, the fact that she was like awake when she was that pregnant while she was running the panel is insane. Much love to her and all of her hard work. But I had to call it out just because I thought, I didn't want parents in the, maybe I was protesting too much. If you're at PAX East, like, about, you're probably a little plugged in. So I probably shouldn't have kind of stood up for the clueless gamer at PAX because those people all paid hundreds of dollars to be there. So I probably should have known my audience a little bit better.
But at the same time, I don't think that kid-friendly games necessarily have the biggest marketing budget and thus the biggest booths at PAX. There were definitely kid-friendly games there, but they weren't the ones with the giant dinosaurs that you climb atop of for a photo op.
Man, I'll tell you what, that game, Ark, is my biggest disappointment in the last couple of years from a, family gaming perspective. Just because, man, I really wanted that to be, I wanted that to be a game we could all play, because it's dinosaurs, right? Oh my God, it's riding dinosaurs and stuff. And then I turned on a trailer and watched a YouTube video, and it was just horrifically violent. And I went, crap, man. It felt like it was wasted because they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to put blood into it. I talked to a couple developers last PAX. I don't know if their game is still happening, but, it was a game called Viking Squad. I don't know if you remember it, but it was like a brawler style, role-playing game it's still in development with this company called Slick Entertainment. And when I was playing it, there was these splashes of blood and guys were fighting, etc. And I got to the front of the line and I talked to the animator and I was like, hey dude, is there a way to turn the blood off? And he was like, you know what? We're honestly thinking of taking the blood out because it doesn't add anything to the game and it's going to affect our ESRB rating. He actually asked me, he's like, do you think that it would be better to just take it off? And I was like, you know what, man, I'm for real. I can't buy this game right now because of the blood. Because it was pretty, it it was kind of over the top, but it wasn't. It's hard to describe. When a guy would get hit with an axe, like this big splash would pop off of like red would pop out behind them, but it wasn't built into the animation. It's not like they had blood like streaming down their face or whatever. You know what I mean? So they had a mode in the game where you could turn it off, and then they would just hit and the guy would just react, kind of like the guys in the X-Men arcade game. They would just kind of like take a different animation or whatever. And so they're like, you know what, we have it as an option. We're thinking we're just going to make that the default and get rid of the blood. I just wish more games would do that. Like, is it really adding to your game? Like, is it really making it better to have like body parts flying everywhere? Because I would bet that in many games it's just plain not. Because not everybody needs to be BioShock Infinite.
No, I totally get that. I was talking to somebody on Twitter just today about the movie Mortal Kombat, which came out in 1995 and was rated T for teen, even though it's based on a game that's rated M for mature, because all they had to do was take out a little bit of blood and violence, and thus they could market the film to a much broader audience. So if you can eliminate a little bit of gratuitous content that doesn't really add much to the experience and thus widen your market, why not do that?
Also, Mortal Kombat was real good.
I believe it is to date the best movie based on a video game.
I think you are correct. I think you are absolutely correct because, man, I remember watching, so when that movie came out, TNT, I remember this like it was yesterday. They did like the making of Mortal Kombat special that aired after the 2-hour Hercules and Xena block. And I remember looking forward to watching that making of for like weeks because they showed all the commercials and stuff during Hercules and Xena, which I watched religiously because it was really dumb.
I love those shows.
Oh, they're amazing. I say dumb in the most happy and wonderful way. Like, those shows are amazing. I own them on DVD, actually. It drives my wife nuts because she hates them. But whatevs. I'm over it. So she doesn't have to watch. And I won't watch Grey's Anatomy. Problem solved, right? So I watched that making of documentary, that movie, when he grabs when Johnny Cage picks up the saw blade that was inexplicably in hell and cuts Scorpion's head off, I was like, oh man, that's so cool. But they managed to do it without making it gratuitous and violent. I was like, this is mind blown.
You know, I'm going to put a link in the show notes, which can be found at plyg.me/44, to a link to a story that Aaron Couch wrote for Hollywood Reporter last August to commemorate the 20th anniversary of that film's release. It's a fantastic article for which he interviewed a lot of the original actors and directors. It's a wonderful look back at a really good movie.
I'm going to have to definitely take a look at that.
Will do. So another question for you, going back to this website that you run, you have engagedfamilygaming.com, you have a day job, you raise 3 kids. How do you find time to actually play video games?
It's a very good question.
I mean, I have no kids, and I don't have a single website that I dedicate as much time to as you probably do to EFG, and yet I seem to find the time for video games just dwindles away, and my Steam backlog grows faster than I can do anything about it.
Yeah. You know what? Today I just bought that Humble Nintendo bundle with all those. Oh man.
Yeah,
I've been wanting to play Darksiders 2 forever. And I finally bought it. Oh, and gave money to charity, and along with 8 other games. I don't know that I'm ever actually going to play it. I mean, what am I kidding? When am I going to play that? So, okay. Here is my secret. Sometimes I just don't get to play games for myself. And, you know, that's the God's honest truth. Sometimes I just don't get to. With that said, I make a point as part of my process. You know, the good news is I am my own boss, and it is not the way that I feed my children. So if a new game comes out and I am like, you know what? I need some me time. Then as long as I don't have any, reviewed copies that were given to me where I have deadlines, I will take a night off. And I've done that. I've taken a week off before. So, because at the end of the day, it is a super hobby, And, I have my podcast that goes up every week, and we will never miss an episode. But, if I miss a couple of days writing articles, my audience gets it. And, we chat in our Facebook community group, which I recommend that you join, because I think you might have some fun in there. Because we talk about it. Well, I'm going to plug it right now. You should do that. It is, the way you get there is you go to engagefamilygaming.com/community. That'll link you right over to our Engage Family Gaming community group. And we just chat about games because, not everything has to be about our kids. There are plenty of people in there that don't have children and just like talk, because we talk about good stuff, and interesting topics. So it's, I recommend it to just about anyone. It's just, we're not going to talk about Call of Duty very often, because it's not very relevant, but I'll just take my time off and I'll play it. And, sometimes in order to do that, I lose out on sleep. That's the one thing that I end up giving up, is I'll end up having to play late after the kids go to bed or have to get up early.
I had a boss at a previous job who had a wife, 2 kids, and a full-time day job, and he was constantly jetting over to California for business meetings, and yet he found time to play games because he could operate on like 5 hours of sleep a night. So he would stay up till 1 a.m. on a regular basis playing Batman Arkham Asylum or Arkham City and have no problems going to work the next day. And I can't do that. I need 6 to 7 hours of sleep a night.
I'm with you. And it's only getting worse as I get older. But that's one of those things. I end up having like 1 or 2 late nights a week. And on those nights, you do what you got to do. But if I stay up really late for, a stupid reason, I end up going to bed at 8 o'clock the next night. So everything comes at a cost. But I don't think that we should judge ourselves and the amount of time that we play based on the size of our Steam back catalog, because that's not fair to yourself. Because one thing that I have learned is that I don't need to beat a game in order to be done with it. There are plenty of games that I'll play for, half of it and say, you know what, I enjoyed it and I'm done. I don't need to go back. I played Dragon Age Inquisition. That game is what, like 100 something hours? I played 10 or 12 and I enjoyed it. I loved every minute of the time that I played, but I got to a point and I said, you know what? I'm done. I don't need to see this to the end because enjoyed it. I wasn't really caught up in the story and I just kind of let it go. And that's one of the things that has helped me kind of alleviate my guilt and really enjoy games more. If I get a game and, I play it for a couple of hours and they're really fun and I'm done with it, I just let it go. And I still feel like I got my game time in, even if I only played for a couple hours. It's very few games that really grab me by the throat and say, no, you will play me. Smite did that. I love Smite. Have you played Smite?
I have not played Smite.
I mean, it's a little excessive in the boob department. It's not quite Dead or Alive, but
I've actually never played a MOBA before.
I think Smite is, as MOBAs go, very accessible, especially on console. Do you have an Xbox One or a PS4?
PS4.
It's just out there, and it's in like an open beta. As MOBAs go, it's very accessible because it's a control scheme that you'll feel more comfortable with because you're playing from a perspective of, it's a third-person action game as opposed to Diablo. So it's a little bit easier to kind of grok. And, it took me a little while to get used to it. But it is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. It's just, you got to get past the character models. My wife, one of the characters that I play wears basically no clothes. And, so my wife actually, it's a free to play game. My wife actually encouraged me to spend money on a skin for this character that it's like a space suit. So it covers her up. She was much happier with me playing the game when I was doing that.
Well, it's the compromises,
It's exactly, you just, parenting is a teamwork thing, and it's not like the request was unreasonable.
Sure. So Engaged Family Gaming turns 3 years old this year. Where do you see it going from here? Do you have any big plans for the site's future?
Yeah. So, this is actually a really exciting time for us. So our podcast is going strong, growing every week. I'm going to have you on there. You don't know it yet, but you're going to be on there.
Looking forward to it.
And it's going to be great. Because you asked a question at the panel at PAX that I think deserved more time. And I think that you might have some input too, because you made some good points, while you were asking the question. So, but the podcast is growing strong. My content team, which is me and my wife, have really started to gel as far as getting reviews and getting things, out onto the site. I've got some really good relationships with various publishers, so we're going to have some cool contests and, things like that. But one thing that I'm actually doing in starting within the next couple of weeks leading up to E3 is every Wednesday night at about 8:30 or 9 o'clock. I haven't decided the exact time. I'm actually going to be doing a live broadcast, like basically a video chat with my audience in the Facebook community. In my Engaged Family Gaming Facebook community, where I'm going to talk about the biggest news from so far that week, and, I'll field questions, and I'm going to hang out with whoever's in the channel for an hour. And if there's nobody there to hang out with me, then I'm just going to talk about stuff. And so we're going to I don't know how I'm going to brand it. We're still working on some of the finer details, but it's going to be me sitting here just like I am right now, which really nobody else can see, but sitting at my desk with my little screen behind me. And I'm just going to talk about stuff and, hopefully get some people in there and, kind of make it of a community event. Which should be fun. And we have recently purchased the hardware and software to start doing Let's Play videos. So we have a YouTube channel that has one kind of test video on it. And by the end of the year, I expect that we're going to be putting about 2 to 3 videos a week up on the page, up on the YouTube account. At the very least, we'll be putting up videos for our podcast, but also at least one Let's Play and probably, some board game unboxings and things like that.
Wow, you have a lot going on. Where are you going to find the time for all that? Something's got to give.
Well, I don't know. Probably going to be working with, a lot of that is going to be, taking advantage of stuff that I already do. I already play a lot with the kids and, so capturing that and, putting it up on YouTube, will take some time, but part of that is, I need to be taught how to edit the footage, and Let's Plays are intended to be more candid than produced. So, I won't have to do, a lot of the fine video editing that, the folks over at like Polygon do. So something's going to give. I'm probably going to be giving up some sleep. And we're always, I'm working with my wife. I'm always trying to find ways to be more efficient with my time. There are plenty of, 15-minute increments in my day that I waste. So we'll be trying to fix that kind of stuff. But, I have always been a dream big and cut back if you can't do it kind of guy. And so we've got the plans. Might as well, go for it. The eventual goal is to make a run at making this, an actual day job. Either through the site itself, which is probably unlikely just knowing how web, like web and, advertised-based media works. But by using this to build my expertise and my audience, maybe I could write a book. And, use that to help propel me or speaking engagements, things like that.
As you just said, the website is at engagedfamilygaming.com. And from there, people can find you on Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all sorts of different opportunities to engage with you and the community. Is there anywhere else or any other resources you want our listeners to know about?
Yes. The biggest thing that I think everybody should see, obviously the community page. I've mentioned that a few times, but for completion's sake, engagefamilygaming.com/community. But definitely look up our podcast. It is Engage, a family gaming podcast. It goes up every Monday, and, barring, a meteor shower, hitting my house. It will go up every Monday morning. And we alternate video games and board games every week for the most part. And we talk about a variety of different topics. We actually had one Nicole Tanner from pixelkin.org on our video game podcast last week, which was a lot of fun. So you can find our podcast on all the major podcasting services except Google Play. And I'm fixing that within the next 48 hours.
Yeah, they just launched their podcasting service within the last month after talking about it since last fall. It's very exciting. There is some trade-off there. I understand they actually copy your MP3s and host them, so you lose some agency over your own content, but you're reaching such a wider audience, so it's a really great opportunity.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. They can have my MP3s and host them, sure. Sure.
I mean, in my case, my Polygamer podcast is published under Creative Commons, so even if I didn't want them copying it, I wouldn't be able to stop them.
Yeah, I'm in pretty much the same boat. They can do as they please. And it's Google. So, in this case, exposure, well, I'm not an artist, so exposure is actually valuable to me, whereas it is not valuable to a lot of folks. And giving people I have had a lot of people that have said, I want to download it, but I don't have an iPhone. I don't want to deal with it. Fine. You can do it on Google. I just have to set it up. It's just something I'm going to fix in the next 48 hours. It's a very exciting time for podcasts to blow up.
Yeah, they've definitely been getting bigger, more accessible. The barriers for entry have lowered.
Yeah.
And it's creating more competition for people like you and me, but it's also creating more opportunities.
You know what? We're just going to be consistent. And that's why I'm sticking with sticking with the formula of, alternating video games, board games, and just sticking it out there. We're small, but it can only go up. And it has been for me. I mean, I hope things are going well for you. Hopefully, some of my listeners will hop on over and download your stuff.
That'd be great. I look forward to being on the show and plugging mine.
That's the hope. This is all about sharing because, us little guys, we got to stick together.
That's right. We got to band together against the big guys.
Exactly. We'll take down IGN. No, we won't, but we'll have fun while we do it.
We'll be the next IGN, the next Polygon. Excellent. Well, Stephen, we've been chatting for over, I think, an hour and a half now. Thank you so much for your time. It's been great chatting with you, and I look forward to chatting with you more on Engage.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for listening, everybody.
This has been Polygamer, a GameBits production. Find more episodes, read our blog, or send feedback at polygamer.net.
It's kind of like Any Given Sunday, really does kind of represent the NFL, even if in a very exaggerated and hyperbolic way. You know what I mean? Exaggerated and hyperbolic, those words don't mean the same thing, but you know what I mean.